Going. All right, everyone, welcome to another exciting meeting of the Kubernetes SIG. This time way more exciting because let's talk about shuffling, blending the decks. No, here's Cyril too. So just to catch everyone up, great things happening on the mailing list. And what essentially I think is going on is we have a donation of a couple of some really great contenders out there, some good discussion about how we pull these things together. Instead of talking about, wow, should we, like we have every other SIG at this point, why don't we talk about how are we going to do this? And the understanding I have is that, CAS operator will be kind of like the landing place for a lot of things that need to be added to it, enhanced, what have you, from CassKop, which, by the way, congratulations on your 1.0 release. And to make a common operator that will be notated, but with all the features included, and dogs and cats living together. It'll be great. But and Tom brought in a great point of view. Most of the people here are in the build an operator world, although it's also true that Oraj has run an operator world, and so is with DataStax with Astra. But Tom is a great example of someone who would be a victim if this wasn't correct, because his stake in this is, I want to run Kubernetes, I want to run Cassandra, I want to run them together, and I don't want to fail because I like my job. Is that a fair assessment, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely coming at it from the user of the operator's point of view. Although I'm, as I mentioned, I'm happy to contribute. I think we're now at a place where we can start to be a more active participant than we have been up until now.
Excellent. Well, we welcome you and all your contributions, whether they're code or opinion. Like I said, bring some judginess. So I'm trying to think of all right, where do we start? I think where we left was, okay, we have two operators. We're going to try to blend these things together. John, you've been doing a lot of the grunt work on the actual repos and, doing a lot of that work. Do you want to start this conversation?
Well, I think.
Can I just spotlight you?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it, what in terms of where we are right now, a lot of that happened on the mailing list. I was happily not too much involved in those conversations. So in terms of next steps, I think, back into looking to contribute and be involved, where and when and how it makes sense, anywhere I can. If that's trying to, when I have bandwidth to try to, there's PRs to shepherd into CAS operator, or to just make noise about that are needed for CassKop or anything else, happy to do that. So that's where I am, I guess.
Okay. So I think maybe anybody takes the floor. Where do we go from here?
What we started to do is, like we said on the mailing list, now that we've published our version 1 that is good enough, we think, for our inside customer, because that was our first requirement. Now we started to open issues on the CAS operator GitHub, just to discuss what we want, what we would need in terms of functionality. Not saying it's not there, because we don't maybe know CAS operator well enough to say it's not there, but just here's the requirement that we need, that we cover today with CassKop, but we would like to cover with first to see if it's possible. So sometimes it is just possible, and that's fine. And if it's not, then we can say, oh, is that something that is good that we are willing to add? And the third would be, who's going to do it? There are some things we can do because we've done them already, but some things that need more knowledge of CAS operator, that it would be better that it's not us that do it. actually. So in my opinion, we've opened 2 issues. Cyril, you did open two issues.
Yeah.
And we've got something like 5 or 6. So I think we want to open them all, or to start opening all of them, so that we all know. We're not going to wait until the first one is discussed to open the second, and just know the whole thing, make it clear, and just go from there, and possibly sometime discuss them here in this meeting, or on the issues. I mean, writings is also quite good, I think, to exchange. So that's our view. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, let me add something on top of it. So also when we create issue, that's also the right time, I think, to talk about the existing features. If there is also, even if the feature exists, maybe something to change or make it more simple to use. I think that's what John was saying regarding the pod template spec, for example, where you have to specify the container, even if you don't want to override the configuration of containers, things like that. But maybe it's more simple to do it. But I think, yeah, that shouldn't, yeah, like John said, that shouldn't be confusing. That should be straightforward to just set the configuration that you want and use it. But it's the same on CassKop, where we have different parameters for the same thing, and we can just merge those configuration into one place and just make it more straightforward to set it.
Yeah. Yeah, so when all this started happening over email, we'd already had in flight like 2 or 3 items that we were not at parity with what CassKop could do, but it's mostly just about prioritization and also what was deemed pretty difficult and if it was needed soon or whatever. So yeah, since the last time I went to one of these calls, we merged scaling down and it's been tested pretty hard. The pod template spec stuff opened up to the point where like people can use whatever foot gun they want to use now. That was the reason it was like a little locked down before. It was like, well, once you vary out of this sandbox, you're probably going to start breaking things, and then you're going to ask, why is it broken? And it's because of some customization you put in. So we kind of flipped our opinion on that to allow whatever freedom you want. That containers thing is like, I would bring that to like Kubernetes. Like, we're just using standard open API validation, and it's not, I don't think we should relax it because you have to enter an empty YAML array.
Yeah, I would say maybe this is just a documentation fix somewhere, or just a big flag somewhere.
Yes.
Something like this.
Yes, definitely. Docs and examples should be much better for this stuff, and show some simple examples. And I know I can get some examples. I mean, they're not from Astra, but they're Astra using like cloud features. So like if you want to connect your Cassandra pod to like, I believe it's Azure's identity management stuff, so you can like copy your SS tables direct to Azure Blob Store. You need to set some annotations. You don't need to mess with the containers, but let's just show like, sorry, you need this extra little thing. So yeah, definitely on docs and examples, we can make some practical ones that show you accomplishing a real thing, and this is the burden. And, you know, leave a little comment like, because of open API validation, you have to require this. That's fine. There's not too many other things. I saw there's a really good discussion happening about the labeling on zones. I didn't throw in my 2 cents. I will. I think we should leave the short. I agree with like deprecating stuff, but like, one of the guiding principles was like, let's keep this easy to use. Like, if you don't know every odds and ends thing about Kubernetes, it's pretty intimidating if it's just like, I have to learn all the Kubernetes specs to like get this in. So I think that was one thing you pointed out, that was like, why do we need, with the volumes, why do we need this pre-existing thing if I can define any volume I want now? It's like, you don't, but maybe you didn't want to like wade through all of the kind of confusing stuff about mounting. Anyway.
Yeah, so the question I asked, for example, in that case was about storage config, and there is a key inside, which is Cassandra data volume, but this is the only key that you can put there. So
okay.
I was asking, why do we need this key? We can just put the storage config under it, and that's it.
Got it. So we had a design in mind, but we didn't know what else would go there. But it was like, let's leave a space here because we're going to expand this here. So if you wanted a volume for, if you wanted specialized volumes, say for the SS tables, for commit logs, maybe for the debugging logs, those would be enumerated, and you wouldn't use the one we have now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that layer was like an abstraction point.
Yeah. The only thing is, I think you should try to tend to not have different ways to do the same thing, because otherwise some people, they're going to put it in the pod template spec, some other people in the other one. And when they, I don't know, when they do the config, it's going to be confusing. Oh, but it does the same thing. See something?
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe the I was really curious to see if you all could contribute the kubectl plugin, because I think that kind of fills some of the need, where it's like, if it's just like, hey, are you the kind of person who wants like one volume and you're just like doing some tests, or you like want to specify everything? That could just be like a question, right? Or some kind of prompt and flags, whatever. And then you see the configuration that comes out when you pick like easy one, or the one that comes out when you pick like more complicated. So I tend to agree that there's a better way to solve it, but we just didn't have that in place. I don't remember some of the other gap sort of things. The kubectl plugin was one that I was particularly keen on, because like I don't know, we could almost try to say like, take the code you have as is and like change as little as possible. Probably needs some change, but
Yeah, but
Did we cover the labels?
I think I just kind of mentioned and went through it like in a roundabout way, but like we had some suggestions about doing something like that before all this. So if you tested a couple, what was the one thing? The labels, I'm pretty open to tweaking how the rack affinity and the labeling and that is done. That's not covered by the pod template spec at all. And I don't really, I would prefer to not let people have like a pod template spec per rack. That seems to be going so far to like, you can create a lot of weird. I know there's some people who will ask for it, but
they do weird stuff production. The other thing we had in mind was to talk about backup and restore, because that's something that
sure,
there are many solutions to the problem. So we've just released one with the Insta cluster. So I don't know if, I know you've talked about Medusa or other stuff. So I don't know the state of this. Maybe it's worth discussion.
Yeah, I think we should explain how we, at some point, I don't know if it's now, but how we implemented it, and how the sidecar that we use fits in. And maybe that way you could say, okay, we can use anything else, or the other solution can do exactly the same thing. So right now, the protocol that we use is only designed to talk to that sidecar. But when we grab our controllers and put them in CassKop, in a Cass operator, then we can decide how we do it, and if we change the protocol to make it more, I don't know, agnostic of the sidecar, or to make it work with Medusa or any other solutions that you decided to use, and that can do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but that's it. We're interested in functionality, so we don't really care about the way it's done. But the thing, so we can open this this issue and discuss maybe how we do it, because we've got two new CRDs, backup, Cassandra backup and Cassandra restore. So that means they can easily be plugged onto another operator. It's a reconcile loop and other bits that we could, I mean, I'm not saying we will, but we could do. So that's worth a discussion. Maybe exchange your views on the integration of Medusa, which supposedly may be a good answer. Depends where it is. So that's one of the thing. Another issue we would have is about how you plan to manage multi-data center clusters like we do with CassKop, because CassKop is another operator which actually remote use two different CassKops. So we could think that it could manage two different CAS operators instead of, but there are some requirements to CassKop. So, for example, multi-CassKop, CassKop doesn't generate the seed list because it's done by someone else. So there is some requirements for it to be. Maybe there are others. There are some things that may be required. That's the way we design it. There may be other solutions to that problem.
For multi-CassKop, did you all do anything with dealing with like getting the key spaces replicating, or that was left to like a different team basically?
Nothing is done at the Cassandra database level.
Okay.
There is no
the only thing we've done is we have the network team, which actually made the pod's IP replicated to the other cluster.
Sure.
Which is a bit weird, but that's the only way we had to basically make a multi-data center cluster talk together. You have to have the IPs. So that's one of the requirements for the labeling, because in the labeling of the clusters, we select portable IPs so that it gets IPs that get assigned that are visible from the other cluster that is on the other side of the country. So it's one of the other requirements.
But all the IPs have to end up being visible, but you only need to know about some of them? Or so?
When you create a multi-data center cluster, you do that, but we also create a mono data center, so you don't need those labels. You can.
Oh, okay. I think I understand.
Not all the clusters are multi-data DC.
Yeah. So we're using CAS operator for multi-data center and like multi-region, like 2 Kubernetes clusters. With just that additional seeds thing we added is very, very small. It sounds like what you have is like kind of an expanded version, but not to that next level where I was seeing like the next, exactly like the tooling, like what does somebody do when you hand this off to them? And then they're kind of struggling with node tool rebuilds and, editing the key space. And like, there's a very, very specific run book to adding a second data center in Cassandra. And like, sounds like neither of our Go-based operators are touching, I don't know, the last 6 steps or whatever it is in this run book. We're on parity. I think what you have is more cleaned up, but yeah, that was the next stuff. And certainly the operators aren't aware of each other. So I was trying to figure out, like, is it worth looking at that? Is the fact that it works now like good enough? And yeah, the networking thing is a big gotcha. Like if somebody sees this. Now I will say, this is sort of maybe Chris is going to chide me. This is kind of a roadmap thing, but we have been working on some sort of like a networking sidecar, basically. Like not asking the user to run all of Istio, but to reproduce like the 2 or 3 of the really important properties of something like that, so that you can set up deterministic networking and get stable IPs and use that, in a bigger context and help ease this these headaches for multi-Kubernetes cluster. That sort of like in the pipeline, and maybe I've already said too much.
It's not Istio specific, really. It's like the idea behind it, using a proxy sidecar to handle the network shenanigans.
Yeah, my point was you don't have to use Istio, but it's taking like those 2 or 3 bullet points off of like the Istio feature set that you want for this problem, and it's just like, well, here I've solved just that and no more, and it's like a much more like Unix kind of philosophy, like just solve this one problem and not all the rest of Istio stuff, which
I guess you're talking about the feature in Istio where you can have one network seen from.
Yeah. Yeah, and but yeah, it's getting Istio installed and configured is very difficult. So I think coupling multi-data center to like you just have to run Istio is sort of, maybe it's fine. To me it's kind of a half truth or something. Like it's just kind of, that's a big prerequisite. It's just kind of dumb. But so anyway, so this is something we're doing, and I think we can contribute it. Like I don't think it's gonna be but I'm not 100% sure where it is or on the roadmap.
I feel like,
how
I feel like we're kind of
yet.
getting into scope creep here,
Yeah.
and without actually having anything yet.
Well, no. But this is a major thing about like how multi-data center can work. So it's not. A few months ago, I would have been like, we don't know, but now it's like, oh no, we know, and we've been testing, and it's just not.
Well, the reason I say that is like, just this is my project manager brain working, is like, let's get the two things together. Let's get CassKop and CassOperator together. Let's settle on, hey, what do we and like finish that negotiation before we, and I think really then what's next together is multi-data center. And in my mind, it seems like, let's get the single data center sorted, and then we'll work on the multi-data center instead of trying to boil the ocean with this. Is that indeed boiling the ocean, or?
No, we can focus on the single data center stuff for like quite a while. It's just sort of like, it's not tedious, but it's just kind of working through these things. But that's like the next frontier. And I think we
for sure.
heard this from like, I don't know if this is a great place for Tom to jump in, but it's like people seem not interested if you could only run single data center. Like if there's no like, how will the project get to multi-data center? Seem like a lot of interest in this stuff kind of dies.
Well,
from established Cassandra users.
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, Tom. I mean, this is a great place for you to weigh in. It's like, is single data center like a no-go?
Oh no, I actually like I like the idea of focusing on solving that problem first, and then tackling multi-data center. Like we have sort of ambitions and use cases, sort of like in the medium-term future where we plan to set up multi-data center, but that's not our initial use case. So like if we could have an operator that worked really well for single data center, then that would be great. Like to us, that's a great starting point, and then we can tackle the multi-data center later.
Yeah, can I just emphasize something? There is I think it's a semantic issue here, but there is a difference between multi-data centers and physical data centers. For example, we have two data centers because we have one where we run the actual queries, usual queries, and one for statistics, but they live in the same physical data center. And in CassKop, we define two different data centers. So there is a difference between having to talk to another region, country, whatever, another Kubernetes cluster and another data center in the same Kubernetes cluster.
Hey, Cyril, yeah. I think that's actually the point. Is we're talking in Kubernetes language, we're talking about multi-cluster.
Right.
Because going from cluster to cluster is really hard.
I think that's a really good distinction. I was talking about like having a Cassandra cluster that spans multiple Kubernetes clusters.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, if they're geographically located in the same place or far apart, doesn't matter, because getting communication from one Kubernetes cluster to another is not a solved problem. There's solutions, but it's not. I mean, I see this energy right now. I'm talking to other projects that are dealing with this as well. Kubernetes really didn't expect you to do that. Like, why would you do that? But as we move into stateful workloads, and and then replication is an important part of a stateful workload for uptime. Now we have this, just everyone's throwing in, you got the Submariner, you got the open service mesh, you got this, lots of opinions getting thrown out, which I don't think you should say no to, but this is a little Wild West right now while it gets sorted out.
But as I said in the beginning, I think we would just like to open all the discussions because when you're busy, when you get to know each other and discuss things, I think it's quite a good time to maybe not solve all the problems, but at least think in the same direction. We could say, okay, now what we've done is pretty basic multi-data center, as you say. It doesn't do all the features, but we could do that's acceptable to start with, and maybe later on we wait for cluster federation. I don't know, whatever functionalities we can get from other like Istio or whatever. But it'd be interesting to have a first solution to the current problem, because that's what's required. So I think we'll open the issue and discuss on it. I think like others.
Yeah, I like yeah, just open all. If it was like especially 5 or 6, 7 bullet,
Yeah,
item
it's not going to be 20.
from your thing. That's totally manageable. Yeah, to wrap
it will be manageable. And now we've got some weird requirements. I don't know how we're going to handle them, because we've got the internal cluster, which is multi-tenant by design, and our teams have done we have very strict limits on what we can do in our cluster. We need to define each and every role that we use. We can't say role.star. No, you have to specify each and every functionalities you need in Kubernetes. We can't run images as root, but that's something you do cover now. Or there are loads of weird limitations that I hope we can be able to handle, but we discover new every time. They're pretty good at knowing all the pages of the Kubernetes book that you could think of. I mean, it's weird. Anyway, for me, that's all. I mean, if we can have the labeling, the volumes in sidecar, like pod template specs, like you said, multi-CassKop, and some backup and restore. That's basically it. Huh?
Yeah, I think, I guess, opening the issues, and if you saw some like prioritization of like, well, we could start testing this if we had like X and Y, and maybe like Z can come later. We could try to work with that. I think getting this stuff merged and tested ourselves. The RBAC stuff, if Patrick didn't want to talk about multi-Kubernetes cluster, I don't think we should talk about RBAC, but
I'm just being conservative. That's all, because I think of like, we can, and it's fine if we talk about it. I'm just being like, I don't want to get wrapped up in like, oh, and here's all the things we have to have before we can. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I mean, that's what
are we going to do to make Tom successful?
RBAC is super in the weeds, but I would love, if you open an issue about like, hey, the way you're spitting out RBAC stuff is like, I can't start with that. It's like, we didn't know if it was good or not. And I think we tailor it. Stuff gets tailored even internally in our pipeline. So like any adjustments could be fine for some of this stuff.
Okay.
So let's talk about, and just in terms of, okay, when do we want to do things, like, and try to put some stakes in the sand. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so is there a place where we say, because what we're going to have to do is blend and then get to a point where we say, okay, this is a good like 1.0 for a better, and then that's what gets donated to the project, right? Because that's part of this process is let's combine, then donate, and then it becomes part of the project. And at that point, it moves forward in that regard. So let's talk about those kind of timeframes let's be realistic too.
Yeah, in my view, first we discuss things, and then depending on what's the outcome, we decide if we merge things or if we do a donation, not choice to the community. That's where we are on our side. But we let the community decide in the end. But we would much rather merge and then let you donate Cass operator. That for us, that's the best. It's the best road for us. In terms of time frame, for me, in in our current sprint, we have the discussions with you that is ongoing. So for me, that hopefully that will be finished in a month or something like this. The discussion, I'm not talking code here, just talking, we agree on what we do, everybody's fine, and then we just do it. I think it's always much easier just to know where you're going. It will be easier to plan for everybody, say who's going to do which part. I think that's everything's on the table.
Out of curiosity, I guess this is a question for you, Patrick. What does the donation process look like?
Well, we just went through it. First things first, getting everything in this stable state. Like, this is what we want to donate. And then I think there's a couple of, the proposal sent to the mailing list. Like, here's the repo, this is our proposal. There will have to be some legal checks, and those are pretty easy. Just make sure that there's no project, like I was telling this to Jim, but I mean, this is an important part. Like, there's no X licenses in there. For instance, you have a dependency on a GPL code. All right, well, if that's the case, then we're gonna have to fix that. I don't think that's the case, but there's a compatibility, a license compatibility check, and then at that point, it's just it gets voted on, and then it gets pulled into a ASF owned Git repo. This is where all the negotiation committers are added to this, to the system. Congratulations, you can put that on your LinkedIn. But then that's when it becomes a part of the project. This is what happened with Medusa. That's what's happening right now with the drivers. And Reaper has gone through this process. So I don't think it'll be a big deal once the dust settles and say, okay, let's go. What I think would be really helpful too is, Tom, are you able to commit? I know this is, I don't want you to speak for all the New Relic, but are you able to commit any time to like giving this common operator a poke, or give it take it through a test run to see how well it is?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly like to. I mean, like our hope at the very beginning is that there would be like one, sort of unified community supported operator. So like, yeah, so like I'm super excited that this is the direction we're all going in. We're kind of in the middle right now of a pretty big migration. Like actually, no more testing with CassKop, actually, starting to use it in earnest. So that is going to require a lot of our sort of time and attention, but I would also like to spend some time, testing out, documenting, poking at the Cass operator and the Cass operator with the merge stuff in it.
Yeah. I think that's, we have Orange, we have data stacks that are obviously going to be putting that kind of energy, but it would outside validation, and I think it'll be this will be part of what I would like to try to accomplish too, is go out to as many operators as possible and say, hey, can you give this a shot? I know the folks at Yelp have said, Toby and Raghu, they said they would like to take a look at it. I think Bloomberg is another one that would be interested. They've indicated interest, maybe DreamWorks. So the more validation we get, like, okay, this works for the masses, the better. All right, is there anything else we need to discuss? This has been a very productive, all right, so if not, what's the next step here? Where do we head next?
Yeah, I think getting all the issues open, discussing them on there, maybe having another, doesn't have to be this call, but another audio call to talk through anything that's like not coming out right in the longer form writing on tickets. But so far it's looked pretty good. Haven't seen a lot of people talking past each other at all. I did have with the idea that we should donate a good thing that we agree on. I raised this to you, Patrick, that not wanting to like slow down anything, but there were plenty of decisions that we made where it's like, oh, we would happily kind of 180 on this, except it breaks backwards compatibility, and like we don't want to do that. It's not for now, but is that the sort of thing we could talk through some of those issues, like, I don't know, later in this year? Probably not until December, I'm guessing, for sure, but simple things like we like some of the design from CassKop, and I just wanted to talk through a couple of things like I'm trying to remember some of the specifics, but simple stuff where it's like how logging was set. Logging is a big one that bothers me. Like we get people who need help, and like I did a bad job setting up the logging stuff, to be honest, to be intuitive. So would like to try to just fix some things, 180 on some defaults that were kind of made in a rush, and with a better underlying thing would have, enabling this thing should be the default, but we disable it by default because it's not that usable. So I don't know. And I'd feel better about donating that to the ASF, where if we're going to say like, hey, community, make stuff with this CRD version 1, beta 1 or whatever, and not like be twiddling with it after we donate it,
There is nothing stopping Orange and DataStax teams having Zooms to work things out.
Sure.
This does not have to happen in a public forum. Let's just get that cleared up. That does not have to happen in a public forum. This does not have to happen in the light of day. If you all want to have, a burn down meeting, work stuff out between you, awesome. And I that's probably the fastest way to get things done is, just do that. And then just talk about it, like, here's what we're doing. It doesn't become reality until it's donated. So, and I agree. I think there's going to be a lot more velocity if you can work through all these issues, pre-donation, get up all this sorted out, but move at the speed that Orange and DataStax will move at. That's fine.
Okay, so I think that's kind of like the next couple steps is like work through the concerns Orange had about like compatibility, feature parity, and then maybe unearth, I don't know, some chunk of stuff that's like, so in version 2, I think we should break backwards compatibility and do this, and like whether we just have that conversation, I guess, and see what anyone thinks. It's not going to be too many things. I'm not, just sort of like a nagging kind of, if somebody wants support, it's nice if it's just very intuitive for them to send you what they have. If you have to like teach them how to find the things, then they can send it to you. I've already seen, we need to fix at least 1 or 2 things to make it that flow easier. And if we're donating it to community, figure the support is more community based in some way. Even if we're still here, it's sort of just like, I don't feel great about donating something that's not intuitive enough.
I think that's legit. Yeah.
But if we need to like send something by like January 1st, like forget everything I just said.
Well, no, I mean, deadlines, there's not a deadline. It's just, as soon as possible, because there's people that are waiting to see what's going to happen, right?
Sure. So we should set some reasonable amount of time boxing.
Yeah, I mean, this should not be the endless. This shouldn't be Duke Nukem forever.
No, but you could do some communication. You're quite good at that, Patrick.
Yeah.
So you could say, we've decided to, not yet, but when we decide to, we say, we're going to have a united operator, and that could be, that's something that can be said, for example. For example.
Yeah, no, I think that is the communication that will really work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is a good thing to figure out is when like a pointer to a repo with here's the beginning of our common code will be really helpful for, especially like Tom. Tom needs to know where am I looking here? What am I looking for? And this would be helpful for me as I talk to other people. It's like, here's where it's happening. Just give me a branch, a GitHub link, whatever. and even like GitHub issues. This is where things are happening, where you can comment on it. That right now is good energy. It shows moving forward, but it's also like where people can participate.
Should we put like some bracket SIG on the issues, or make them?
Good question.
Because
yeah.
For me, it's going to happen on your GitHub, on the CAS operator issues. So maybe we could make them, highlight them. I don't know.
Yeah, we can use it. We've been using the labels, not maybe religiously enough, but yeah, happy to make a label for these concerns. Yeah.
That would, and if you do, let me know, and then we can. That's something I'd be more than happy to try to communicate, out to the world at large. It's like, look, this is happening. This is where you go to look at it. Look for this tag in the GitHub issue. I think that's a cool message.
So one of the timing questions I have, I mean, it sounds like the two like larger discussions that are coming are like around multi-data center and around backup restore. Like, do you think like those need to be like totally worked out before we're ready to like donate and and sort of declare it ready? Or do you think that like you can iron out sort of the feature compatibility for sort of the single data center case, donate that, and then like once that's sort of the unified operator, then build multi-data center and backup restore like from that base?
I think backup and restore can be there in the donated stuff. I mean, I don't know, John, what do you think? Like, or Cyril, like?
Well, my thoughts, in not specific to the features, are don't let that hold up the process, because you can always come up with something else. Say, well, what about this? And then you get a bug. And you're like, well, I say just start the wheels in motion for, decide up front what are those issues that will, if there are issues that need to be sorted out prior to that process, put a lid on it and say that's it. And then, so if it's whatever feature X and that happens to land or screwed up and needs to be changed, well, then that just comes in the next version. Say, well, we need to do a new major version release, of the operator. So I think the sooner we get to that common operator with, it's part of the, in Apache, I think the better off we're.
Well, we can discuss on each issue whether it's worth of a milestone for donation. That's.
Yeah, I put that in chat. Like, I put that it shouldn't be, only because I think that will be a 3 to 6 month thing to do a really good version of it.
Oh yeah, the complete one shouldn't be.
Yeah, we don't need to strip out what between the the two organizations, what we've made to support multi-data center with like hefty tooling on top, right? Because that's what it sounds like CassKop is doing, and it's what we have. We don't have that tooling in a place we could open up, but Astra supports multi-data center, so I'll let you kind of read between the lines there. So yeah, I wouldn't strip out what we have, but yeah, I was thinking like the nice version I wanted to do before any of these conversations started was like 2-3 months of work, probably with only one person to agree with themselves. So, and I'd want to, have the discussions and stuff. But the backup and restore, I think we've all worked through a little bit. So that's more of a solved problem, and we can come to some agreement. And I mean, certainly we'll delay a little bit, but not as much of, the work is, I think, a little easier, I hope. There's a lot of caveats for the multi-cluster stuff too, whereas like backup and restore is really just like,
no, it's not that simple. Huh?
Yeah, it's not that simple, but it should be simpler than multi-Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, well, if you have a topology change in the middle of your cluster, of your backup and restore.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of runbook kind of things. It's like, don't do any of this while you're, yeah.
It seems like something an orchestrator would manage. You know, I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box here, but you know, if you say expand my cluster and it's like, sure, let me do this destructive operation during the middle of a backup. That sounds like a perfectly no, it should not do that.
Yeah, so I mean, like that's something did you all ever make a webhook for CassKop? I don't think so. Yeah, we looked at a bunch of other operators for inspiration for that, but and we look at CassKop often for some inspiration, so not that match there. But yeah, so the webhook can block that, Patrick, and that's the kind of thing to raise is like, okay, like based on the status I'm seeing, I'm gonna like reject this write request. Like, no, you get a message, no resizing for you because a backup task is in flight.
I'm just talking after a backup. If you do a resized, then you can't really restore anyway. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's some, yeah.
So anyway, okay. So I think we've got the next steps. We're going to open the things this week or beginning of next.
Yeah.
Then,
I really want to thank everyone. I mean, this has been a long process, but it'll be worth it when we're there. And I really appreciate how everyone's just coming together as a community. That's kind of a rare thing in 2020, so it's nice to see. But yeah, I mean, our community is really going to benefit from this. Already see like the excitement building. Yes. KubeCon is next month. Yeah, I was gonna say who's going, but nobody. But I am looking forward to a KubeCon where we can actually sit in the same room and talk about this. How about that? I will sponsor that party. So
that's on recorded video now, Patrick.
Yeah.
You're gonna
didn't I? But I can edit it real quick. Right? No, I'm gonna go on record. I will sponsor that party, and it will be a good one. I don't know who I'm gonna get as a DJ, but I'm sure you'll never heard of him. All right, thanks everyone. Again, just thanks for all the efforts and looking forward to the next step. We have another Kubernetes SIG meeting in a couple of weeks, so maybe we can touch base then. See you on the mailing list.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone.
Nice.
Bye.
Bye.